All right. Good afternoon and good evening, everybody. Hopefully this works. There were some funky back-end things. I'm not seeing anybody in the live viewers yet, so we'll have to see if this is going to work or not. If not, we will have to re-share the link because it looks like this is only a few people. There it goes. Maybe they figured it out. Okay, anyway, welcome back to Coast-to-Coast EVs, your fortnightly fast charge on electric vehicles and infrastructure. If you're catching us live, thank you for joining us. And if this ends up being something that we are talking into the wind to ourselves for a second, then thanks for rejoining us later. But reminder, you can catch us one way or another. Next day, audio on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, et al. And we usually are up by around lunchtime. And then you can check us out on your commute on the way home or the next day, Friday. We're joined here today. Welcome back, returning guest, Jacob Espinoza, Mr. Arty Penguin 1.
Hi, everyone.
Is, where you will most regularly find him in various places around the country doing his diligence of site checks and holding CPOs to account. So thank you for all the hard work around your area.
Steve, if I could just chime in really quick.
Yeah.
The other... I'm looking on YouTube and it's still the static link. I don't think it actually went live over there. So I don't know if there's a way of, I've got the chat open so I could post a new link over there in order to bring people over.
Yeah, let me, I do see people starting to join, so.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm getting a little live. No, I think you're right actually though, because it's usually, it's up to a lot more people at the moment.
Yeah, there's a lot of people over there kind of chatting away.
Yeah, so maybe it's pulling in the wrong thing. Okay, I'm going to fire across some separate links. I'll do some research in the background here. But in the meantime, Jacob, if you want to give us a little background as to where you've been and what you're doing recently. I know it's been about a year or so, maybe even a bit less, but you've done your travels. So catch us up on where you've been and what you're seeing.
Yeah, so most recently I went to the Permian Basin just to check it out over there. Still waiting on Tesla and a few others to patch that gap between El Paso and Dallas. Very interesting to see that. Otherwise, I've been mostly in New Mexico. Earlier, so I think in May, I went up to Wyoming, Cheyenne, and through Colorado, and went through there, but mostly within the state of New Mexico. Still waiting on Tesla in northwest New Mexico, but otherwise been able to go all across eastern New Mexico. Then one of the best ones I've been able to do is the Panhandle of Oklahoma, which is really nice, pretty remote there. All enabled by the Tesla there in Clayton, New Mexico. So otherwise it's been a pretty busy time there, and I've been doing the comma ADAS tests along the way. They just announced a new comma device, so I'm going to be waiting on that. But like I said, mostly within New Mexico, still trying to get through the remote areas in the western side of the state, the Gila and northwest towards Farmington, where it's a little bit difficult.
Gotcha. So there's wide travels there, and obviously you'll have come across some of the stations that were either supposed to be out there by now on the NEVI side or are still hanging in that orange wrench hell on PlugShare. I am going to jump into the comments here. I think I need a separate link. It looks like what's happening is StreamYard just introduced the ability to go vertical, and people are saying it looks like shorts, so maybe we've got two streams that are, one's trying to stream like a vertical phone type of thing, and this one is the regular one. So I will try and share a proper link here if I can. But in the news, whilst we give ourselves something to talk to, we are getting pretty close to completion of the next J3400 transition. We've had Volkswagen go live with supercharger access this week. A video from Tyler at the Average EV on that very topic. So he is successfully charging now, and we're also hearing rumblings of BMW starting to get access. It looks like it's that testing phase where folks are in kind of a they get access unexpectedly and are able to charge, but then it gets dropped the next day because there's some opening and closing going on. But it sounds like they will be very soon in this ecosystem as well. And then the last holdout was, let me see, Stellantis models, right? And with the launch of the Jeep Recon this week, Stellantis confirmed they'll be going to next year 3400, not just in the US and Canada for their vehicles, but also over in Japan and South Korea, interestingly. But Jacob, you do a good amount of testing of Tesla superchargers, and they've kind of been important for your travel down there in the desert Southwest. How is it coming along in terms of the transition to NACS handles there? Are we actually getting them kind of interspersed into some of your stations down there? And, Tesla in general, how is it starting to look?
Yeah, well, with Tesla, one of the soft spots, which is where they really need to improve on, is Raton, New Mexico, just south of Trinidad, the last town, New Mexico. They've been having some issues with, I guess, their network connection, and whenever that happens, I can't activate through the app, so then it falls back to only vehicles with plug-in charge. So I saw Rivian there, they're able to charge. Obviously, native Teslas are okay, but that's a little soft spot there because vehicles like Kia EV6, at least my model year 2023, and I'm not sure maybe your Ioniq 5, Steve, they don't have the plug-in charge, so they wouldn't be able to charge there. But otherwise, the Tesla supercharger experience has been pretty good. The short cables are usually only an issue if they install like weird diagonal ones, like Clayton. If they install the ones at the end of the stall, it's usually not too big of an issue. And they usually put the bump stops, they've removed that. But it's nice to see now pretty much everything new is the version 4 dispensers with the proper cables and everything. And for third party, I'm seeing a little bit mostly through Alpitronic. So that would be like BP Pulse and then Iona that has the NACS cables there, and it seems like Iona is doing a little bit better with the handles being more flexible, or I mean the cables being more flexible. But the cable management does make a big difference if somebody spec'd an air cooled cable like BP Pulse is a little bit unwieldy at the plug in, but the swing arm helps balance it out a little bit. And based on my experience with the BP Pulse, seems like it was a half setup station. But luckily, Alpitronic software kind of saved the day. Otherwise, it would be pretty difficult to use it. So I was not too pleased to see that.
Gotcha. Yeah, it does. I mean, it took a while there because obviously we're talking about losing track of how many years it's been now. Several years since we kind of started the ball rolling. But obviously, we're starting to move towards seeing more of that connector type app. Just regular sites, as you say, Iona, Walmart, starting to get those in. NEVI Go, I know, has done a few of my locations locally with NACS kind of in big letters on the bollards. And I think over in your area, Eric, this is something that you're probably seeing a little more, if not at some of the Pilot Flying J locations, but certainly the EV Go owned and operated. In your travels across kind of Northern California, are you starting to see those pop up more, or is it still very divided CCS1 and then a whole bunch of waiting for next to come across?
It seems like it's mostly a whole lot of waiting still. We, at least with EV Go and the Pilot Flying J, it's primarily CCS1, right? They have started to make that transition to NACS, but otherwise, right, we still don't have Iona open locally. Like I think the closest Iona to me is actually in Oregon, so that's like a 400-mile drive for me to go see an Iona station. But the other would be BP Pulse, and they actually are deploying, at least on the Alpitronic units, they are deploying a mix of NACS and CCS1. They're actually favoring NACS, but I mean, I'm not a huge fan of how they're distributing it, because they're putting all NACS on one dispenser, all CCS1 on another. But it does seem to be typically around to like a 60-40 split in NACS favor. But otherwise, yeah, it's still primarily, and then of course, Electrify America is still exclusively CCS1. So.
Except one weird or two weird stations, right? There's they try to cram them in.
Right.
I'm saying that more and more though. There's Walter and I talked a little bit about Mercedes-Benz high power charging in the midweek after the charge giving event here in up in New England, Connecticut kind of area, and they've actually opened one recently near me that has that kind of kludge of all the things in the middle. So you've got the CCS, and then kind of in the middle there, NACS and another CCS, but they're on shorter cables, so it's almost getting back to that. I mean, you're going to have to repark if in some of these cases, but it's I'm not sure that's my favorite way to do it. I do kind of like the way Iona's deployed it with the separate and very clear kind of stalls for each. Walter, what are you coming across as you travel the southeast there, seeing different kind of station inputs? What level is NACS and that kind of handle come across to some of the sites, and any particular favorites on the type of installation you've seen?
Well, this was actually the first time that I did a road trip in probably a very long time. I don't know why, but I just haven't been in the pattern of doing anything. There was an open house over at Out of Spec where they were doing that flying car with Pivotal. I don't know if anyone has seen that. So I made the trip out there, and I did have to make a refueling stop on the way back in order to splash and dash my way home. But that was just, 5 minutes out of Pilot Flying J. That really wasn't anything. So I can't really say much about the spread of ones that I've actually seen, except for this morning. And I've been to a lot of Tesla, and they're just pouring more gas on the fire. It's just amazing how many stalls they continually put in everywhere. And my hometown in particular, there's a new station going in just 2 miles away from another station. So it's like, well, one station wasn't enough, so let's put in another one just a little bit down the road, kind of decision making from them. And as far as J3400, they're obviously the leader. I shy away from them, not only because of the cable issue, but the dual stall and everything is always been an issue. But with the V4 dispensers, it's supposed to be solved. But even still, 3-meter long cables with the V4 dispensers are still truthfully kind of tight. I have to nudge up there. It fits, and I don't have to take up 2 stalls. That is true, but typically the way they'll put their pedestals is mid-stall, and so you have a bit of an angle coming to the, in my particular case with the Equinox, it's in the back driver's side quarter panel, and that's a bit of a stretch. It does reach, but it's tight. And there's nothing like the 5-meter long cables at Alpitronic that are starting to become increasingly ubiquitous where I'm going. But I still carry my adapter, but I cannot remember the last time I've used my adapter. There really hasn't been a need, although the excitement concerning the opening of the Tesla Supercharger network, and now that it's a year past with VW gaining access, was supposed to be such a tectonic shift in the ubiquity of charging, to where we are now is really non-consequential for me. But yeah, as far as ports go, the only ones I've ever charged on in the past 2.5-3 months have been CCS native, and I haven't even seen any. Well, no, that's not true. So this morning I did go to a couple of under construction Iona stations where I did see NACS handles on non-Tesla chargers, but beyond that, that's basically it. So I think there's still a long way to go, and we're going to be in adapter hell for a long time with the 2 different standards. There's just no getting away from it. And you buy a car and it sticks around on the road for, I think, Eric, excluding your cars stick around much longer. So you're going to be driving your Bolt for another 20 years at least.
At least,
right?
Yeah.
You just got a fresh battery on it also, and I'm looking at once I get my cars paid off, how long I'm going to continue to drive them, because really the only thing that goes wrong are the myriad of modules occasionally have to be programmed, and typically you have to go to the dealer in order to have that done. But I mean, these things just keep on going like the Energizer Bunny.
Jacob, as far as adapter and adapter hell goes, are you pulling out? Well, first of all, do you have a favorite adapter in your trunk or front? But also, beyond that, how often are you finding you need to?
Oh, all the time, basically, for the adapter. I am so used to charging at the Teslas that I'm really thinking seriously of getting a charging port changeover, seeing if that could happen, maybe through other means, maybe if Kyle Connor knows that Out of Spec. It'd be nice to get swap the port location, but at least swap to NACS if that's at all possible, because I charge the Teslas all the time, because number one, I pay for the Tesla membership, so the $13 a month brings the price way down, price of the Teslas pay, And the good thing about Tesla, they're also, even though Francis is terrible, both of them are, that's the final price. Final price is what we pay. The worst is EA, honestly, because not only their app refuses to show you if you pay membership, but the price can be for whatever tax is local, and you don't know until after you charged. So yeah, EA is just terrible. I can't wait until So I primarily try to use a Tesla as every time, and yeah, the 97 kilowatt speed that I'm pegged at isn't too bad. I mean, in the summer actually helps me not battery overheat. It is a little bit slower. I think 150 kilowatt really is the sweet spot, and that is exactly 50% faster than 97 kilowatts. So if you don't mind waiting a little bit, then that's not too bad. But at least for the most part, the superchargers have been pretty reliable overall, and you get a pretty solid session. And in the case that there aren't reliable, you could always swap to another stall, because by and large, the minimum number is they install 8. Not 4, not 2, not 1, 8. So that's why I've been using the Teslas quite a bit. And I was so used to the adapters when I went to Lordsburg, which is a NEVI funded site with the adapters enabled, the Magic Docks enabled. I did the normal thing, open up the trunk, prep, pull the adapter. I was like, oh no, I don't have to. I can just do the normal release and everything. It was just really nice.
And which adapter do you have?
I have a pre-production Electron one. I need to get that swapped out. I mean, I've been waiting for the Amphenol one, but I guess that's not coming to market. Nice to get to the A to Z one if anyone has a spare or anything. But the one I have been working okay. Just gotta be careful not to, and then it could zap you or whatever.
Well, I was gonna say, because didn't Kia and Hyundai release an adapter, an OEM adapter?
Oh, that was a terrible. That's probably the worst one ever, because they underspec'd it, and who knows what I'd get, either probably not the new Electron, honestly, the A to Z or the Amphenol, but who knows what happened with Amphenol with that.
Well, that's why they're saying to use caution with the OEMs, because with the eGMP, it's only pulling a max of 350 amps current, so you don't have to overspec it. But then if you're plugging in any car that can take over 350 amps, then it becomes a fire hazard. So
yeah, I just didn't like how they whenever they'd get the adapter, who knows what happened. It was no unknown brand, and I just wouldn't get that one. But like I said, I would like to get the Amphenol one if they ever brought it to market, but I guess they're delaying it a little bit or something. I'm not too sure.
Yeah, I've been fond of the A to Z for the few tests I've done. I would say I haven't really had the use. I'm just kind of probably the opposite of Jacob, really. I'm typically, because we have so much choice over here, especially when I head down the coast, really more or less avoiding the superchargers other than as a backup. I did check out one yesterday down in Canton, Massachusetts, because they added one of those solar canopies. Nicely branded, really neat little station, and it's also near one of my favorite breweries, which doesn't hurt. Typically the bins are overflowing, always the garbage cans. Walter will attest to this. They always seem to be piling high, but they did have separate recycling, so that was kind of a neat one. But really nice canopy, really nice location right off I-95, interchange with a bunch of other roads there, so definitely one to check out if you're in the area.
Did you say 95 canopy?
I-95 canopy?
Yeah, so the Tesla supercharger put in a canopy station on I-95?
Yeah, it's right by an interchange. It's just south of Boston, Greater Boston.
Wow, because there's 2 stations in North Carolina that both got canopies also, so they must have specifically said Interstate 95 stations from now on are going to be getting canopies or something. But anyway.
Well, it's rare up here, but I did notice that previously, I mean, this is really in the weeds and not part of our topic at all, but just for the sake of observations, it was previously a time of use site before they had anything there, and now I believe they've got storage alongside the solar canopies, so they went back to a flat fee, so it was 54 cents, and then off peak it was 41 cents, something like that. Now it's just flat fee 41 cents. I'm wondering if the canopies give them more control over our ability to just price it flat, and they have the reliable rate, which would be an obvious benefit to them, aside from just shelter in the snow as well up here.
Definitely in the CPO wars, that's one thing, one of several things, but one thing that Tesla definitely has to stand them out is the price. They definitely are going cutthroat there.
Yeah, so there is something going on with StreamYard tonight, so apologies for the kind of confusion. We've definitely got multiple streams going across, and I think it's somehow trying to send a vertical version, so it looks like everybody who's going to find us found us. And thank you for kind of sticking through. I think one of the issues is that it's trying to create a version for like the shorts or the vertical channel for people on mobile, which doesn't seem to be working. So we will figure that out post stream, but we can continue talking, and we'll definitely be all buttoned up for the podcast version. If you're listening to this the day after, I will probably cut all this out. But I'm going to send intros down the bottom here whilst everybody else goes through the main topic for this evening, which will, first of all, we'll cover some of Jacob's area, I think, but the biggest kind of piece is the NEVI reboot, which has started to gain some traction again. We're definitely seeing a lot of action. Last Friday was a bumper day. It was hard to kind of keep track of who was in the lead because we had Pennsylvania, who'd been overtaken Ohio over the summer on 20 sites. Ohio was on 19 open NEVI sites, and then Ohio opened a couple more, and Pennsylvania's opened a couple more. So we're definitely, I think we're still in a position where Pennsylvania is leading Ohio a little bit and has way more in the can. But there's a lot of, you've seen the reports from Jay at Wisconsin, lots of NEVI stations over there being lit up. They had new awards in Wisconsin this week. Quick Trip kind of leading the charge with those again. So a lot of activity on the NEVI side, but the biggest piece is kind of whether we still need it, because we do have this ongoing, weekly, you'll see Walter's updates on the AFDC listings. We'll have Jacob kind of weigh in on what he's seeing from the private sector, with Tesla Superchargers obviously being a primary, but a lot of, Francis, of course, is maybe not a name that we all jump to, but they are leading the NEVI awards, and they've got a lot of sites in the ground, so that's more on the public side. A lot of different players on the private side starting to really crank out stations. Jacob, I want to make sure we go to you first because we don't get a chance to hear the Desert Southwest kind of picture too much. Maybe you can start on the kind of private sector side, the Ionas, Walmart Energy isn't quite there, but they just opened up in Arizona. So what are you seeing down there, and where do you kind of place your hopes for the next wave of DC fast charging in the Desert Southwest?
Yeah, well, I see Tesla really expanding a lot, especially the NEVI awards they got. I think they were just waiting on it. Now that they got the full version 4 supercharger cabinets out, the 1000-volt cable, 500 kilowatt, that went live in October. I think they're going to start energizing and refreshing their corridors, because nationwide, the interstate, well, pretty much Interstate 10, 20, 40, and 8, especially 80. 40 and 80 were the first ones they built out. Those version 2s are approaching a decade old, so they're going to want to be replacing them even for native Teslas. So they're going to be doing that throughout Interstate 40 in New Mexico and also Interstate 25. And I think we're going to see that next year. There was just, like I said, the delay because obviously the NEVI money was up in the air, but also Tesla's trying to get their cabinets all situated and all buttoned up as they were doing this transition from like a version 3.5 and version 3 plus to full version 4. So that's with Tesla and the other ones. So it looks like I see Walmart. It looks like Interstate 40 is going to be the corridor they build out. They already have one there in Albuquerque, not the one with the EA, but another one in Albuquerque. And I also see them, like you said, sprout up in Phoenix area. It looks like for the major urban areas, they're going to be prioritizing, if they can, and once they have extra capacity, non-interstate corridors. And honestly, Walmart has so many great locations in this state, like off the interstate or even out like Silver City, New Mexico, Las Vegas, New Mexico, where sometimes I might even need to go to Walmart. They have a subway there, and if I'm parking, I should be charging eventually. I'm pretty sure they'll do that, fill it in outside the interstate corridors. And regardless of that, we're still waiting on NMDOTs for the rest of the NEVI money. But it's mostly those big players, and for now at least, it seems like unfortunately they're sticking to the major interstate corridors. Unfortunately, Interstate 25, since it's the least traveled north-south interstate, is probably not going to see much development yet. Maybe 26 or 2027 we'll start to see it. But yeah, Tesla's going to be replacing much of their older units, and hopefully the local utilities or local businesses will start to fill in the gaps. But that's what I'm seeing from here in the Desert Southwest.
Thank you. And kind of as far as Walmart goes, because we don't have you on often enough, I want to make sure I get this take from you. The old kind of classic, nightmare DC fast charging scenario is the usually EA in the back of a Walmart parking lot. Obviously, Walmart's putting its own stuff in there, still in a parking lot, not necessarily with any pull-throughs or canopies or any of that kind of stuff. What's your take on, as people use that example as a kind of criticism and a pejorative? Is it as simple as this hardware is better? Walmart's own branded stuff's going to work, or do you still want to see them up the game in terms of amenities, ways that people can use the site, that kind of thing? How are you feeling about those initial sites that are going in?
Well, I think Walmart did the hard work early on, and they invited EA there, and maybe it was a little bit rocky at times, but I think that the Walmart native is going to be way better. They're even showing those EA sites there. They just call it third party within the Walmart app for the EV charging. So I think their native integration, hopefully there's the Alpitronic and some really good hardware, be great. So they keep all the data, and it's going to be all vertically integrated. And I think Walmart can really roll out fast because they're a very large company. And I think the key thing is they have their own construction team, and for the most part, they own or have long-term leases on the parking lot that they sit in. So they could easily, in the Walmart stores, use a lot of power. So they could pretty easily, within a year, just roll out EV chargers to their own parking lots, and the good old vertical integration of Walmart will really help speed things up. And like I said, and then also all the other statistics, like the 97% of Americans live by a Walmart or live within 5 miles of Walmart. It's like that's a real good thing to fill out the network density, because there are a lot of small towns that are off interstate, but they are Walmart towns, so they could easily complete that quite quickly. And I do hope they just pick, it looks like their software team is not too bad, but like I said, they can just go with the hardware. And if they're keeping it all in-house, I think that's for the better, so they can grow, expand, do proper maintenance and everything, instead of leaving it to a third party like Electrify America. And I hope, because of the way things were written, they're going to be able to put their own chargers next to Electrify America within the same lot, because they have priority. And that would be the best case, honestly. There'll be like some little bit of competition within their own lot, and maybe it'll force EA to improve their services.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, seeing them so close together would, I don't know if this will actually happen. We'd need to tap Landon off paternity leave for this, but I think there's some good kind of reason for that, with only being 4 stalls at some point in the very near future. Probably already that feels pretty dated, right? So having an extra 4, 6, 8 Walmart branded stalls, we'd pretty clearly see where people would go. But yeah, so, and just a quick little shout out to your vehicle, because Tom Palmer is very enamored of it. So that is a Kia EV6 indeed. If you want to give us a little trim level detail as well, we'd be probably happy to receive.
Yeah, it's the Wind rear-wheel drive 2023. So yeah, it doesn't have the new infotainment, but it has, I think, the tech package. And yep, but it's been pretty good. It's going to hit 100K pretty soon, and it'll also hit its, I believe, 3rd year anniversary. Yep,
And
3rd year. This January 20th.
The year series, right? All good.
Yeah. Wait, what was that?
No ICCU issues?
Oh, no issues with that. I think they just had the VCU firmware update that fixed any issues with that charge port. But otherwise, it's been pretty good. But yeah, just quite a lot of paint wear and other stuff from being near 100K. So I'll be blowing through that 10-year warranty in only 3 years with the amount of
we got
doing.
Our Lyric is about 50K, approaching 3 years. So you're lapping us. Quite impressive.
Yeah, I might be driving Kyle Connor level mileage on that.
Burn through those warranties as quickly as possible, out of spec style. Very good. So we kind of overlapped some of the topics there, but obviously, part of this conversation is to cover the private sector, real acceleration, and we want to give that side to it before we hit over to the NEVI side. Walter, you're probably in the best position of anyone, seeing these every week. I know you've kind of sided off a lot of the tracking projects to different folks, but you're still kind of the hub that we all go to. So maybe you give us a little lowdown on, what we're seeing and which players are really starting to take up the baton.
Certainly. And I would like to just kind of touch the third rail that a lot of the OEMs have been pulling back on EV models and production volumes, and battery plant investments. A few other things have been recently in the news, and the DC fast charging station build is still at a fever pitch. And some people have been saying, well, it takes a long time to build a DC fast charger station, so we're just seeing like lag that will eventually start to true up. But I don't think so, because it takes a long time to produce a car, and OEMs do not stop and pivot on a dime. When they make decisions, it's multi-year decisions that they're making, very similar to timelines of DC fast chargers. In fact, it's probably arguable that when an OEM makes a decision like what has been occurring, likely that has been a deliberate decision that has been formulated much longer than it takes in order to put it in a DC fast charger. My personal opinion, that's fair to say. So it's almost like there's a tale of two EV worlds, one where the headlines for the OEM producing cars and battery plants is vacillating, and another where DC fast chargers from, as you say, private investment is increasing, and the two of them don't really seem to mix. My personal opinion, what's going on is there's a couple of things. So something called vehicles in operation, or VIO, is a stat that's commonly tracked by the DC fast charger industry. And it really, from what I understand, is being conveyed, even if no more electric vehicles are sold, there's still not enough DC fast chargers in order to support the number of VIOs currently in the environment. We had a banner third quarter. We sold a whole bunch of EVs. Where are they all going to charge? Well, we don't have enough chargers just to sustain what we currently have in people's garages as it stands, let alone, God forbid, we should actually start to hit an uptick. And so I think that's the general thought, that, whether or not we sell EVs or not sell EVs have been sold past tense. And as a result, we need to create a charging network sufficient for what we currently have before we start to put more on our plate. Secondly, the battery prices continue to drop. And I just saw on Autoline Daily, before coming on here, the tale of two Jeep-like cars. One is a Ford that is manufactured in China, has over 300 miles of range, and comes in at about $30,000. And the other is a Jeep. Did you call it a Recon? Is that the one that's currently coming out? At about $60K and gets 250 miles of range. So the American Stellantis version is double the price and has 40% less range than the Ford one that's made in China. So the truth is that the tech is there, is viable, and is continuing to improve and decrease in cost, as any form of technology that is going through an adoption curve tends to happen. And as a result of the dropping cost of battery prices overall, eventually things will kind of level out and more EVs will be sold. And as a result, we don't have enough DC fast chargers. So they're continuing to invest in trying to get the high ground for the inevitable tsunami that will crash upon the North American shores one way or the other. I think that's the general consensus. But to answer the question, it's ferocious. I just got back from a whistle-stop tour through the Carolinas, North Carolina, South Carolina today, and I just kind of hit a couple of highlights. There's so many stations going in. Thank you very much. Yeah, that's a great station. That's Iona in Greer, South Carolina, right across from the BMW Performance Center. And that's the headquarter. That's the capital of South Carolina. Pilot Flying J just opened up a canopy pull-through station there. So tons and tons of new investment. And Pilot Flying J is a really interesting narrative, because not only are they continuing with their build despite what seems to be an ebbing of demand for the speed and stall count of the stations that they're opening. So it flies in the face of reason, but they must have good reason to sink investment into increasing the velocity and size of their station builds. Tesla is going absolutely gangbusters, and I know that it's really tied to a portion of every Tesla that was sold is how supercharger stations are funded, from what I understand. I don't think that's overtly known, but I think it's kind of read through the tea leaves that that's generally how it happens. And, there's been a lot of Teslas sold, especially in the third quarter. So that means there's a lot of supercharger stations getting ready to be built on the horizon. And the list goes on and on and on. Every time I turn around, you and I were talking just this past week that you You know, if you look over your shoulder and you see a construction site, there's a better chance than not that it's an electric vehicle charging station going in.
Yeah, I just, I tried to do, mostly my tour was trying to go through the central Massachusetts, the one that we were talking about for, from the Mercedes event in central Connecticut up via an Iona in Simsbury, Connecticut, which for anyone in that area is going to be ready in the next couple of weeks by the sound of it. No canopy there because the local naysayers and not in my backyarders said no, but it will have all the usual Iona accoutrements. But going further back up, there's, I'm just stumbling across stations. There's a lot of weird stuff, some kind of, fleet charging depots and Ready, obviously just blanketing the state with Autel 120 kilowatt units. But I stumbled across this site, which already has a Rivian Adventure Network and a Tesla supercharger. Just saw a, kind of random construction site, looked in PlugShare, and sure enough, buried under all of the existing pins of active stations, there's a Mercedes-Benz station going in there that, I had no idea about and was not on their map to the best of my knowledge. So this is just, ongoing kind of places popping up in, not, it's not remote, it's not rural, but it's definitely one of these that just, flew under the radar, even for someone who's obsessively checking PlugShare every day. But for Eric, up in the Northern California area, you get some of these. Obviously, you see the the Iona Grand Tour this week. I guess is not something that we've covered really yet, but they're heading down from San Francisco all the way down to Los Angeles with all the stations that they're going to start to put in. Who are you seeing kind of take this private sector on the West Coast and really use the private funding to boost infrastructure in what is essentially 2-3 times the size of most EV markets across the US?
Well, I think just in terms of the private funding, I think obviously Iona is making a lot of noise, but they're really not that present in my location, and I think a lot of this is coming down to sleeper sites. And I think at least in Northern California specifically, it's not all that easy to identify permits. Or, so when people are going on the hunt for permits, if it's outside of a major city, they're not really coming up with a whole lot. So whether it's the Walmart networks or the Iona networks, it really is hit or miss. I think the Iona that's going in locally, the only reason someone found the permit is because they were searching specifically in the city for if that construction I saw at the Walmart was a Walmart charger, right? And it's like, no, it's not, but there's an Iona across the street. So it's kind of hard to find who's who, but I would say, Walmart's a big contributor in the private sector. Iona, BP Pulse is making major inroads. In theory, again, Mercedes, but I feel like a lot of this is proof in the pudding, like where, right? So there's that one Mercedes charger in Red Bluff. So private sector wise, we're getting some funds. It's just not nearly as much in the Northern California section as what you're seeing in Central and Southern California. And then in particular in the Bay Area, I think the other big elephant in the room is GM Energy, right? With EVgo probably has their biggest, their biggest population and concentration of chargers in California. And so, that it really is mostly grouped around the San Francisco Bay Area and the greater Los Angeles area. But in conjunction with GM Energy, they're kind of spilling out a little bit more, and then of course the Pilot Flying J, and then of course GM Energy is partnering with more than just EVgo now. So we also have the 060 network, which I believe is also getting some of those NEVI funds. So we're seeing a pretty diverse, but in terms of just like the heavy hitters right now, I think probably BP Pulse is the one that's out in front the most in terms of actually having put units in the ground already. So
yeah, the gigahubs kind of do a lot for you, don't they? Especially when they're hitting the airports and hopefully gaining the kind of utilization that BP Pulse is expecting from those. But they've still been active on the Thornton side as well, from what I've seen. And Or to remember the other brands, Travel Centers of America. I know some interesting locations have come up there, but that does bring us to NEVI because.
Before you start, though, because I think you even mentioned that in your maybe newsletter, EVI newsletter, but what percentage of the Rivian network is now open to the public? Because they're increasing as well. I saw Nikki from Transport Evolved when we were going down to the Bolt Block Party event. I literally used the Electrify America charger that was right next door to the Rivian charger that she used. I wasn't even aware that Rivian charger had been opened for non-Rivian owners at that point, but apparently most of their network at this point is now also public.
Yeah, they hit past 90% now. There's a really good site to follow. I think it's called rivianroma.com. I'll put it in the show notes, but they're tracking everything across the Rivian Adventure Network and actually the reliability stats that Rivian gathers as part of its A Better Route Planner purchase and from Rivian Fleet to kind of, I don't know how well the reliability stats actually stack up with reality, but definitely obviously for Rivian it's going to be solid. So they've got more than 90% of the network is now universal access, and you're talking, because there's only 130 odd sites, you're talking, maybe 10 to go, very, very small number. So pretty much all of it is accessible now. And what I tend to find is that, it's one of two things, right, with Rivian. It's either a really nice kind of out there location, your Joshua Tree, your Hamptons, your national parks down in the Blue Ridge Parkway kind of area, or just another parking lot that Tesla's already in, right? As I say, the Mercedes-Benz place that I went to, that I stumbled across, already had a Rivian and a Tesla side by side, essentially. So it's building up the kind of densification of those areas rather than adding anything to it. But people still travel those areas. You've got to go on your way to the adventure. You probably need to stop at a grocery store. So there's cause for doing that as well. So yeah, good call on Rivian as well. They've only won one of the NEVI awards. They've got other NEVI awards, but they've only opened one NEVI station over in Michigan, I think Lansing. Iona has the one in Fruita in Colorado. So the big players, that we're talking about in this private sector rush do have some stake in the NEVI game, but they're much, much less leveraged towards that than the likes of Francis, which has hundreds and hundreds of awards. Less so Tesla. Tesla's an interesting one with NEVI because they actually lost a lot of money from a lot. It's not a lot in Tesla terms, but we would blink at it certainly millions of dollars for pursuing sites that they were going to build anyway. They had NEVI funding, but during the pause, which started kind of early February and went through to the legal action in the summer, Tesla just kept building. These sites kept on opening, so we had a bunch of these that were awarded NEVI sites, but we were kind of confused. Did they actually get any money or did not? The ones in Alaska kind of clarified this. Unless they're going to retroactively get the money that Tesla just kept building, they didn't actually have any contracts to get that NEVI funding for the awards that they'd conditionally been given. So they just carried on building and may lose out as a result. So kind of a negative side of the program on that, in that someone who was just trying to pursue the program's kind of goals of building out station really didn't get compensated for it. But it does bring us on to the topic of the evening, kind of set against that context of, private sector carrying on where NEVI was supposed to kind of blanket the country with chargers. At the moment, 127 locations across, I believe it was 16, 17 states, something along those lines. So it's hitting in patches of the country, but it's certainly no means nationwide yet, whereas a lot of these private sector, Iona, pretty close to having a cross-country route, certainly active in a bunch of states, even with only 35, 36 stations. Walmart Energy is starting to really ramp around cities, but still in different markets. Florida's going to be hit big. Arizona will get a bunch of stations. Texas has started strong. So you're starting to see them build out pretty strongly. All of these initiatives starting to fill gaps where maybe NEVI was supposed to. So brings us on to the question that after the legal action and actually being able to get the funds back and start to build these things out, is it actually still needed? The program itself was started in a kind of pre-NACS, pre pretty much everything we know now about where the industry has gone, coalescing on a certain connector type and starting to open up access to all of the supercharge networks, locations that were previously inaccessible. So NEVI was formulated in this kind of vacuum of, we've got walled gardens, we've got limited private sector investment, we've got a lot of failing kind of providers, and now we're kind of on the other side of it where maybe the private sector is starting to take care of it. Jacob, as someone in a kind of region that has been crying out for fast charging hardware, and you kind of watched the NEVI program early on, do you think we still need the program?
Yeah, and I'm very pleased that it didn't get fully canceled. And I think the new NEVI, like the final NEVI, I think it's a little bit more flexible in ways that the original NEVI wasn't. So I still think here in the West, 50 miles, there are sometimes areas where there aren't any towns for 50 miles. So that requirement being relaxed was good. Some of the original requirements that I think they kept and needed to be kept, 150 kilowatt minimum is very important. 4 chargers is very important. 1 is none, 2 is 1, 4 should be the minimum. Even Tesla, though they haven't built 4 for a while, but honestly, anywhere 4 should be a minimum, whether it's hotel AC charging or DC fast charging, unless it's very limited use cases, say you have maybe 2 different stations in adjacent businesses. But yeah, 4 minimum. But we need it to go off the interstate, because the development right now, it still primarily is on the interstate. And I'm very pleased with still TxDOT's plan. They've always been trucking along with NEVI, and I think the original or the final plan, once it's fully built out, is to have a charger in every single county seat. And there's 254 counties in Texas, and especially here in West Texas, they're pretty small counties geographically. So having one in every county seat will allow you to just travel anywhere you want to, the most direct route. So I think that's the most important thing that NEVI has kept, and it's still needed for the areas that here, honestly, here in New Mexico, we're probably not going to see private development until 2027, 2028. In certain areas of, like, even Interstate 25 is very neglected, but other areas of the state, the Gila region, Northwest, there's not going to be any private development for quite a while. So NEVI is still needed, and I'm glad that it's a little more flexible than it was, and it will be fully built out. And now, like I said, the only bad thing with the extra flexibility, now it's really up to the states. Some states, like I checked Wyoming's, they really haven't done anything. They're just, it says they want to be, give them the approval to move on to other non-interstate corridors, but they haven't done much. I think my state, New Mexico, has done pretty good. Also Texas, those 2 states have done surprisingly pretty good. Have kept things moving despite the uncertainty.
It's a good call out, really, because it's both sides of the coin with the fully built out status. Previously, for anyone who's not deep in the weeds on this stuff, states were going to have to build out the travel corridors that are the alternative fuels corridors, with that requirement that Jacob mentioned, a station every 50 miles or less, although there was some potential to apply for exceptions or exemptions. That was quite hard and fast. It was kind of seen as a part where you couldn't get the extra funds unlocked for all the community remote places away from travel corridors unless you were going to get the stamp of approval from the Federal Highways Agency, which in the previous administration would have been very difficult. They would have been sticking to the rules and trying to really make sure that these exemptions were absolutely necessary. As Jacob says, if you're in a town or a state where there's 60, 70 miles between towns and there's nowhere to put a charger, that's where you need an exemption. On Wyoming's case, they've actually decided that they were fully built out with level 2 chargers. So somehow that counted as a travel corridor kind of check. So if you travel through Wyoming in the north and can't find a fast charger that you can use, they think that you should be able to use your level 2 and just sit there for about 10 hours to continue your journey. So that's where it's been abused, in my opinion. There's a lot of the states are starting to just use it as a box checking exercise now for fully built out status, applying for approval, getting it checked. And in some cases that's fine. Pennsylvania and Ohio, some of these places really have done a good job already. In Wyoming's case, obviously they haven't even opened a NEVI station. They've initially said that they don't need it because they don't have enough EVs in the state, failing to think about travelers. And then beyond that, they've said, well, the private sector's taking care of it. But to Walter, this is useful for perspective, because in the south of Wyoming, that could actually be argued, right? The folks behind you, Pilot Flying J, have done a great job filling out that corridor in the south of the state, but then in the north, it's kind of crickets. So one of those where on both sides of the coin, I guess you could make the argument.
Pilot has definitely shown up in areas where you're saying there's a dearth. For instance, in my neck of the woods, South Carolina, basically only had Tesla and electrical utility charging stations. That was it. And in fact, if I want to spread the net a little bit further, NEVI, I don't think has got a single station open in the state of North Carolina, South Carolina, or Tennessee, which are the three states that I actually frequent the most. Virginia is a different animal. They've actually done quite a bit, but there's no NEVI. But private investment has gone from 0 to 7 with Pilot Flying J in South Carolina. Wyoming, I think, is up to 7, I want to say, also, specifically along the I-80 corridor. Now, they're not going to build into off interstate towns like what NEVI Phase 2 or second round of funding was supposed to help facilitate for people doing daily grind, not doing road trips, being able to get access to electric vehicle charging. But at least on interstates, for people either passing through or natives who are using the interstate system for some kind of day trip, there is charging to some extent available. Now, Pilot Flying J is a bit difficult to rely on because they do only put in 2 dispensers typically. Now, there is indication that they're reassessing and going to a larger, but by and large, the number is 2 dispensers. And if one goes out, Eric has pointed out multiple times, that's a 50% loss of service at a station. You can get queuing, you can get all kinds of problems should that happen at a station. So it's not sufficient, even though it sounds great that we have 7 stations from private money opening in the state of Wyoming, is still nowhere near enough. And really, I think that NEVI safety net, I don't really know what to call it, is going to more adjust the landscape than we might think. It's kind of like that quiet fill in the gap route to the massive build that's going on. And another thing, if I can call out, that I'm a little bit concerned of is the whole universal charging initiative that was being coordinated by the Joint Office, which, as I understand, no longer exists, and where that may stand in the future. Because although the Joint Office didn't actually take care of the technology, they did do clerical and facilitating work in order to move that process along. And I actually was thinking about while we were talking, I have not done a DC fast charger session in the past, I'd say 6 months, that did not have plug and charge available to me. The 2 that I typically use are Iona and EVgo Pilot Flying J. Those in my vehicles are plug and charge. I can't remember the last time I pulled out my phone. Like if I go to a Tesla supercharger station, yes, it's reliable and yes, it's ubiquitous, but what I have to do is I have to get the adapter, I have to get the phone out, I have to identify the charging stall, I have to pull it up on my phone, zoom in, get the charging stall, swipe the session to start. I have to connect the adapter, and then I have to, that's a lot different than pulling up to a station, plugging in, and walking away, which is really what we were, I understand, on the cusp of when the whole Joint Office seemed to be dismissed. So anyway, a little bit off topic there.
No, I think it's a good point of what, if you take a step back and what NEVI was intended to do. A lot of folks in the comments, thank you for pointing that out, was, fill the gaps, start to say, well, it's not, the private sector can fill in, if it needs 10, 20, 30 more stalls, they can start to do that densification piece and do what BP Pulse is doing, maybe around the cities and the metro areas. But nobody is going to build a fast charger in Happy, Texas, which was, one of the first ones that went in down there. And that utilization is going to be horrendous. You will not want to look at that charger report from a accountant kind of financial eagle kind of perspective. But people who are traveling through that area are going to be very, very happy to have received that fast charge, right? So that's the original intent of NEVI. And it also kind of informed a bunch of standards that we're starting to look at now. And again, to Walter's point, having a credit card payment reader on every dispenser, having the ability to see what you're going to pay. Again, Tesla not typically having screens had to kind of rethink how it's going to put these screens on the charger, have the fee up front and clearly accessible, have someone be able to tap a card and get the charge started. So that is kind of the antithesis of Tesla, the too many parts, minimalism, that kind of thing. So, I think I can understand why that wasn't as popular with them. But you start to see these things, like Jacob said, the 4 stalls, the 150 kilowatts, the 97% uptime. Again, all very bare minimum stuff. We're not going to want to have this as what we aspire to, but as setting a baseline way back in 2022, that's kind of a time when we needed this kind of stuff, right? It has informed all of these things, even if it hasn't built out a nationwide network, as some people were maybe hoping. But Eric, as we've covered a bunch of ground there. What are you kind of thinking off the bat from the various thoughts that are flying around?
Well, I mean, I'll go back to what Jacob was saying, and I do agree that I do like the changes that they've made to NEVI during the update since the pause. I think going back to its core foundation, though, I do think it's important because they did set, and I think it's important for us as EV owners and EV advocates to communicate this clearly. They set the minimum standard for what a site needs to be. And so that's both in terms of the number of active stalls, but also the minimum amount of power for a site that is supposed to be facilitating travel. So in that sense, I think they did a great job. It wasn't as important, I think, in California because the usage is so high here. You were already seeing CPOs accommodating that. There's also the additional regulations and rules around access and payments they're in place in California. So it's now a legal requirement, not just a recommendation, but NEVI following along with that recommendation and that standard that mirrors what California's laws and regulations state, I think is also important. Having the freedom to activate a charge, because Walter, I agree completely with you about the experience with using the superchargers as a non-Tesla owner. They are far, far less convenient than if you were a Tesla owner, obviously, but in many ways they're still less convenient than if you were using a different public charging network in a non-Tesla, right? Because of the way you interface with the payment. Like after plug-in charge, the next easiest way to pay is either with an RFID or a credit card, because you're at the charger, you swipe your card, you pull, and you plug in, you're done. So I think all of those standards are important, and I'll call back again. I think I might have mentioned this before. There was a interview or a discussion with Rory Sutherland on Everything Electric, where he was talking about the difference between Europe in North America. And in North America, a lot of our struggle isn't covering an EV population, right? It's not that there's a million EVs in Wyoming that need to charge. It's that Wyoming is a big state. And so the chargers aren't there to cover a population. They're there to cover a geography. And that's a really hard sell for the private sector. And so in that regard, NEVI is also very important, right, in terms of making sure these chargers are distributed in a way that they cover the geography of the nation, not just the populations and EV owners. And remember, Electrify America got smacked back on this by CARB, because in the state of California, they were picking and choosing which disadvantaged communities they were supporting. And it just so happened that all of the disadvantaged communities that they were supporting happened to be along busy interstate routes. So this distribution of chargers in a broader sense, and then again, calling back to what Jacob was talking about with West Texas, right? Northern California, where I am, is a lot more akin to someplace like New Mexico or West Texas in terms of the distribution of communities. And what we're seeing is a concentration of chargers along the affluent travel corridors. So Interstate 5 and Highway 101, with nothing along Highway 395. And so getting chargers in there, so far the only private charging provider that's put chargers on Highway 395 north of Reno is Tesla. There's nobody else in California. So you're talking about a massive corridor of a lot of communities that have no coverage whatsoever. So this model of, hey, every 50-ish miles, but start to cover all of these other communities and make sure that this money is allocated in a way that makes sense for the state. I think it's important, even though I'm looking at our NEVI funding rounds here in California, and they aren't really doing that much. They're doubling down on the mistakes that they've already made, in not covering some of these rural communities that need to be covered. But at least, there's the thought process is there and the foundation is there for the type of coverage we need of certain geographical areas, even at the expense of a return on investment from a private CPO's perspective.
That's kind of an important point because, we do think in the near term and the medium term, the NEVI stations are supposed to have 5 years of operations and maintenance budgeted for them. So we know that covers us for the rest of the decade. But my fear here, and I think a few people put this in the comments as a potential concern, once the installation funds run dry, who's going to maintain the hubs now? Not necessarily being hubs, because we're talking more about probably, people are going to maintain the stations that are really in high utilization areas. Those will be covered by private sector kind of ruthlessness in needing to make the money on them. But the ones that are kind of sitting out there in these kind of places that I've talked about, your Happy Texas, your kind of middle of Wyoming, your not so much Moab, because that's a great station that's going to get a lot of rich people coming to it. But there are places that in 3 or 4 years are going to start to say, well, we don't have any more O&M budget, and there's a potential here now that we've had the kind of delaying effect on EVs that yes, they'll still expand in California and the Northeast and up and down the coasts and in Colorado and some of these places. So those people will still travel, but in an area where it's just not being used and probably still isn't being used a whole lot, but is still a very useful location. Is that gonna run dry in terms of operations and maintenance budget? And someone says, look, that's not something we can justify keeping alive anymore. But in 5 years' time, does that matter? Walter, what do you think? And definitely want to go to Jacob on this after, because he's in an area where he's seeing the stranded assets, seeing
exactly. Yes, and I think the answer is the whole point of NEVI was to be a catalyst for propelling the revolution to occur, and then once it does, the private sector would take over. And to answer the question about Happy Texas, who would maintain it, the answer is probably a couple people from Happy would realize that rich people are passing through their town and they could probably sell some candy bars and hot dogs to them if they put an electric vehicle and maintain it, electric vehicle charging station and maintain it. So I think in 2030, when the funds run dry, you're looking at a dramatically different landscape. So if we sell no more electric vehicles between now and 2030, okay, we could probably argue what you're describing, but that's not what I think what's going to happen is the rest of the world is moving to electric for light duty transportation. There's really no argument about that when you look at the statistics. The United States will as well, because we have no choice. And as a result, the numbers will steadily tick up. We will continue to sell electric vehicles. The vehicles in operation will continue to increase, and the demand for charging will similarly increase, and the economics will just take care of themselves. The invisible hand of the economic system will just make the need satisfied by people putting in stations in order to create a business venture.
So, Jacob, you may hold the most iconic picture of stranded assets of anyone in the EV community. You can probably give a little bit of context to Crazy Postman's example, but then, your wider context of what you're seeing in terms of maybe state-funded kind of assets that have been left to put out to pasture, and where you think that intersects with NEVI and what could be the case in 3-4 years.
Yeah, well, thankfully that location they fixed it. They moved those out. I think the state of New Mexico got a lot of 30 ChargePoint CP 250s or something like that. So they luckily moved that out of there. But yeah, just poor planning. And one of the earlier comments that was mentioned, NEVI, yeah, there was a big delay, not only just because of the pause, but a lot of companies just paused their own plans to try to bid for this NEVI money, and it caused at least 1 to 2 years delay. I'd assume, especially if they were already planning to build sites, they see it and they're like, oh, why are we going to spend money when we can actually bid on it and wait? So that was a thing. And the other issue with NEVI is the companies need to last. So I know about the maintenance, but the companies, they can't be fast burn companies that go away. And luckily, even though France have been doing for a while, although I still see the company basically all their growth has been public funding. They started in Oklahoma, they got VW settlement money for a lot of the area, and they're getting NEVI money. I'm still not seeing where they're doing it on their own, which doesn't involve any type of public money. But at least they've been there long enough. Some of the other ones, Red E hasn't really done that much here in this state. They've been kind of holding back. And one of the weird stations they opened in Albuquerque was it was non-NEVI. They got NEVI funds to do it along Interstate 40, but I guess they partnered with the same site host Fast Market, Valero gas station chain of convenience stores. They partnered with them and they did a test location, I guess. Further out, it was not NEVI compliant, it was a far out location. So they haven't really done that much there, but they've been holding back, and I'm not sure what Ready's business model is, but they usually, I think they partner with like car dealerships or something else. But that's the only thing I'm just concerned with, some of the startup companies or the fast burn companies that are getting the NEVI money. Like I'm very okay with Tesla getting it because they've been doing charging since the beginning basically, and even Francis, they've been doing it for a little while, and I don't think they're gonna go out of business. But some of the other companies, it's a little bit concerning.
Yeah, so Ready, I would stick up for a little bit, mainly because what I'm seeing in Massachusetts is, they haven't expanded with a lot of the state level funds here, and we haven't done anything on NEVI yet, so it's not NEVI funded. They seem to be going as dealerships certainly, but also very small business. Just local strip malls. They're at cafes. They're at bakeries, grocery stores that are smaller chains. So they seem to have some model. I don't know how they've tapped into this. It's they're just shipping those Autel Maxi Charger kind of 120 kilowatt units out the door, and they're springing up all across Massachusetts quicker than people can post in PlugShare, because Walter does this dance every week trying to find pictures of the right stations, and I'm the same. I just can't find any of what they look like. So Ready seems to have some model, but I think you're exactly right. What we're going to see at some point here is a separation and a consolidation in the industry of the CPOs who've built out heavily leveraged on NEVI are just going to go under the weight. They may get 3 or 4 years out of this, once they've actually got the money. But Tritium current CEO Arkady Sosnov, who was formerly of FreeWire, was on a podcast saying, like, look, I wish NEVI had never been here, because a lot of people over leveraged on getting that money, and then it just hung in the wind, not because of even the pause, just because the states were slow, the bureaucracy, the grinding wheels. And if that's 10%, 20% of your network build out, you can weather that, right? The cash flow isn't that important. But if you're, heavily all in on that, and that's your 80%, 90% of your plan to build out, then that dries up or gets delayed or just doesn't come to fruition, that you're in trouble. There's nowhere that you're getting that money back unless you've got a very, very lucrative second line of business. Let's see, Eric, on the downsides there, the kind of, obviously Walter pointed out the positives of it being a catalyst. Jacob's pointed out the kind of, minimums that we've talked about. The downside of potentially setting companies up for a fall, unreliable equipment potentially, because we've got this swathe of kind of different, there's something like 14 or 15 different hardware makers involved. There's vast numbers of, different award winners from the biggest companies that we've talked about, all the way down to like a local chocolate company or a hotel chain or something. These may be big companies in the background that have all the money, but how is that kind of going to play in further down the line, do you think?
Well, yeah, I think I definitely agree that even under its initial phasing, NEVI was problematic because Walter saw that we saw the same thing, right? All of these companies gearing up to do these massive build outs, and then, we could get NEVI funding, and then all of a sudden everything slowed to like molasses pace. So I think even the initial startup of NEVI, and then of course we have, I guess, a canary in the coal mine, in the California mine, if you will. We have some examples of how these types of programs have played out in the past, thanks to some of the stuff that they've done in California. So a lot of these older 50 kilowatt sites that you might even see me use still to this day from time to time in California were built under California Energy Commission grant funding. Well, those were grants that were penned like back in 2016, right? 2015, 2016, we had these initial grants. And then by the time the stations got built out, it's like 2020, and they're putting a single 50 kilowatt charger into the ground. And NEVI has that same problem to a lesser degree, because I think we'll all agree probably as EV owners who travel, 150 kilowatt charging is more than serviceable for most people traveling. It's not super fast, but it's not super slow either. But that 150 kilowatt charging standard, as we're now seeing Alpitronic roll out the HYC 1000, we're seeing Tesla roll out their true V4 600 kilowatt charging. These chargers that NEVI is pushing out now are going to seem outdated. And I feel like what we're going to look at these NEVI sites in just a year or two, right, before they even run out of their maintenance budget and funding, before they become stranded assets or anything else, we're going to look at them the same way I look at Caltrans rest stop chargers that are sometimes 40 kilowatts, sometimes 50 kilowatts. There's maybe one, maybe two, maybe four if you're lucky. But it's just this outdated charging site that you're really only going to use if you have no other option. And I think that's the other risk that we see here with NEVI, is they've established it so early that the standard at the time they established it, while still workable today and in the near term future, is going to seem so outdated by the time most of this equipment goes into the ground that it's almost like a self-defeating, right, implementation. This is one of the criticisms that I do have about the GM Energy Pilot Flying J, is you need a big enough, compelling enough site to drive traffic to compel people to come to you. So if you only put in 4 dispensers or 4 stalls and nobody uses it, it's maybe not that site was not adequate, or maybe it's not that the site wasn't good, it's that it wasn't compelling. And so you've created this situation, this self-defeating situation, where what you've put in isn't good enough to drive people there, and it's going to give you this false sense that nobody wants to use those chargers, when the reality might just be that it wasn't quite good enough, and had you just made it a little bit better, people would have been using it a lot more. So I think those are some of the issues that I see with this sort of NEVI standard baseline. It kind of cuts both ways, right? It's good to have this as a minimum standard, but at the same time, we have to understand that these stations are going to look extremely dated in just 4 to 5 years.
I guess it comes down to whether we believe that the program kind of did what Walter was saying there that it really should do. Did it catalyze this action that we're currently seeing? Did it bring all these players into the space? And it's hard to kind of say that, because when you think about the likes of Iona and Walmart, those kind of projects seem like they were germinating at the same time as NEVI was, in its very infant days and not really hitting the ground running. So I don't know, Walter, what do you think of, what these stations have been built anyway, do you think?
Yes, right. So the purpose, I believe, of NEVI, from the people who were formulating its rationale, was to be a catalyst. But we are in 2025. We're moving into 2026, and we're seeing the bulk of the NEVI stations on the verge of actually getting built. Walmart doesn't know how to spell NEVI. And I harken back to one thing Eric said when I was early on in the pilot flying J tracking phase. And I was looking at what was getting built, and Eric's like, they're probably doing all of them. And looking at what we're reading the tea leaves for Walmart right now, I'm pretty confident in saying that right now the standing order in Walmart is build them all. There's no target. There's no single location. They're building them all, and everywhere where they're planning on putting a station in has already been identified, and they're in the process of putting them all in simultaneously, and just whatever transformer delays or whatever is going to be the dictating long pole in whatever project they have. And as Jacob mentioned, they have their own construction teams. They've got their own project managers. There's a well-oiled machine. They're not waiting for NEVI funds. It's a business imperative that's coming down from the top in order to complete this project for a business add-on to the services that they offer. And so that's where it's coming through. And by the time NEVI actually, let's just say we get to the point where the last NEVI station is actually built, the catalyst is gone. We don't need things. You're like lighting a match on a bonfire. The fire is burning. It's fully engulfed. And so my personal opinion is, I agree with Arcady. I wish NEVI would have never occurred, but not for those reasons. My personal opinion is we have to take a step back and look at the elephant in the room. It became a target because the Republicans did not want to have the Democratic NEVI project to be a win, and so they needed to attack it. And in so doing, they actually attacked many things associated with electric vehicles, and it became highly politicized. And that whole situation, I think, became counterproductive. Although it was nobly in the inception was noble, it actually ended up being harmful in the long run because of the counterstroke. And I think it was pretty clear at some point there would be a counterstroke. It's the same thing with Obamacare. Obamacare was a noble effort, and the problem is you don't want it to be a win for the opposite party. So the other party, when they gain power, they need to start attacking the programs from the previous administration, and on it goes. So had it been completely above politics, and I suppose that's an aspirational thing, likely our electric vehicle adoption would be further along now than it would have been otherwise, my personal opinion.
So I want to make sure we answer a question here, which might lead us off nicely because we've only got a little bit left. Kind of talk about, these, where we're getting this competition and when we're seeing, these multiple options that Eric has been enjoying for years at every exit. How many spots do you guys frequent when there are more than one, where there are more than one option? There's not that much of that in Wisconsin yet. And Jay is seeing that, as one of the people who's benefiting from NEVI, because the quick charge rollout has not been uniformly NEVI, but a lot of it is helping the Quick Trip really build out that network. So you kind of see it in these regions and isolated pockets. But we'll go around as we're in kind of the right order here. Start with Eric on the West Coast, from the hub of EV adoption where most EVs are. How often, or maybe it's the flip question, how often do you not see multiple charging options at any given exit?
I mean, at this point, it feels like it's more often than not, especially along I-5, right? When you're talking about Interstate 5, and I could just go town by town, right? Whether it's Kettleman City that has 2 different superchargers. It has an Electrify America 10-stall station. It has a Caltrans rest area station. It has a Chargetronic station. It has an EV range station. So you have a lot of these that but it's just also the nature of Interstate 5, where the exits are few and far between, and the ones that have services and the ability to host EV charging hubs are even smaller, like or even fewer. So, I had made that comment about Nikki from Transport Evolved stopping at that Rivian location that's right next to an Electrify America location, and they're both just across the road from a Tesla supercharger. So it's just really common, and I think it's a combination of the EV population plus the nature of the different off ramps that you have in California, where at any given off ramp on an interstate, you're going to have multiple travel plazas, multiple stores, multiple, and then of course there's a lot of cat and mouse where different CPOs seem to be following each other around, where there'll be a Tesla supercharger in Gilroy, and then Electrify America will build a charger right next to it. And then there'll be an Electrify America charger in another location, like the one in Fireball, and then Tesla will build a supercharger next to it. So they're kind of following each other around. So I think it might just be the nature of how the state is and how the travel corridors are in California.
And moving to the Southwest, Jacob, I know it's not as common for you, but when you hit those Tesla superchargers, is there regularly or occasionally another option either at that exit or very close?
Well, usually it's sometimes somewhere else in the town. With the Teslas, it depends like where they built it. Like Clayton doesn't have any, but there in Roswell, the local electric utility finally energized the one downtown. So now you have Tesla's not there yet. They're coming soon, but you have the charge point there at the DOT's office with no amenities, unfortunately. And then you have Francis at a convenience store, and then you have one downtown. So it's coming in certain places, but yeah. And then going back a little bit on NEVI, yeah, it's just kind of saw that a little bit with the tax credits too. The price of the vehicles kind of spiked up, and with NEVI you had both delays of, all the charging infrastructure. They want to wait for that funding, and maybe price spikes or different equipment choices, because it had to be the NEVI, was it the BABA Buy America Build America requirement with the NEVI as well, so just added more constraints in regards to that versus if it was just all private funding. I think if we could redo NEVI, I'd say devote the majority of it to off interstate corridors, and because those ones, they were already going to be built out. NEVI might have, if it was implemented the right way quickly, it could have juiced it by a year or two, but they always will need and have needed off interstate corridors in the areas where it's very remote and there aren't any businesses to support it. So they need NEVI because the local small business couldn't support it, or it's very remote and they would need that extra funding. But I think it's starting to fill in. Once a charging provider comes into a town, you'll see that. And like I said, once we get further along, like Maverick, hopefully they'll do the big chains. We'll do rollout on their end. Maverick recently converted the gas station there in Lordsburg from a Chevron to their own. And I'm not sure after they acquired the Come and Go if they're going to fully keep going with that rollout, but we need to see the convenience stores roll out NEVI, and of course roll out chargers, and then also other businesses with certain dwell times. And once they see the momentum going, I think once the big ones like Walmart start going, then we'll hopefully see other businesses that are a little more risk adverse, and they'll see, oh, Walmart's doing it, I guess we better get in on it, because this electric vehicle thing's here to stay. It's not just a fad.
Yeah, I think you're definitely going to get your wish. The fully built out thing is now just basically you can click your fingers and point to some level 2s and you've got it, so they can go anywhere and build whatever they want by the sound of it. So I expect to see that coming to towns and off travel corridor routes very soon. From southwest to southeast, Walter, we know from your travels that you're seeing multiple providers at most exits, but how common is it that you just get off and basically have your pick of the different providers?
Scarily vary. Couple of call out exits. The Gaffney Premium Outlets, which I was at today, has both a Tesla supercharger and a Mercedes-Benz high-powered charging location. And The BMW Performance, which used to be kind of like a soul charging location, now has the Iona getting built just on the other side of the interstate. That whole Interstate 85 corridor going from Charlotte to Greenville to Atlanta is just smothered. Basically, every exit has got something in it. Used to just be very slim pickings, but every exit's got multiple different options, going back from VW Dieselgate station builds to very large Tesla builds to Electrify America builds to EVgo and others as well. The utility companies here in the Southeast, specifically Duke Energy, has been very vigorous with putting in charging stations along corridors and in communities. What was the other one that there was multiple stations? It escapes me. Sorry, it's been a long day, but it's very common now where you pull off on an exit and there's multiple options to choose from. And as I said, I have not had a need to go to a Tesla supercharger station. And it's not like I'm anti-Tesla. It's just, it's a question of friction. And the path of least resistance for me is cough up another 10 cents per kilowatt hour and plug into one of these, have Auto Charge Plus work. It's immediately off the exit. I go and use the restroom and maybe buy a slice of pizza or something to drink, and then come back. My car is halfway to where it needs to be in order to get me home. And I check my cell phone for 3 or 4 or 5 minutes, whatever, unplug, and off I go. And that is definitely the path of least resistance for me. And as of late, I haven't had to deviate from that experience.
Yeah, thank you. And then Northeast, for my part, very similar to what Walter describes. If you're on I-95 until you get a little bit north of Portland, maybe even Bangor, Maine, that's where it starts to get out into the sticks, and there's very little options. Even the Tesla supercharger up that way is only a 150, not available to anybody else except Teslas. So it does get a little bit skinny up there in the mountains and the kind of northern New England, but definitely around greater Boston and even over to, as I was saying, kind of central Massachusetts. Now we're very well served. There's local convenience stores, as I say, with the Pride is out of Springfield. I think they've got a lot of stations going in. Pioneer Valley has a lot. Once you get out to Western Mass, it starts to be a little more slim pickings. You have got now the Mercedes-Benz high-power charging, just kind of emphasizing how much work they're doing up here in the Northeast. They're right out in the West alongside an EA and some of the Tesla superchargers. New York, obviously, we know has been covered really well. Evolve New York's done a great job there, and quite often there's a Tesla supercharger next to it or a Rivian Adventure Network. So I would say it's fairly common there. And really, you're talking about, you've got to get into Pennsylvania, and this brings us full circle, where Pennsylvania and Ohio, to some extent, where NEVI has filled the gaps. Previously it was always maybe some pilot flying J's have gone in the interim, but essentially what we've been looking at is the cities, the metro areas, Philly, Pittsburgh, all the small towns, that are in between those, starting to fill out, maybe Harrisburg a little bit, but NEVI has transformed the corridors in Pennsylvania. It's not even a question mark, because I've done those, constantly over the years to Ohio, and now they're easily traversable. Previously, it was Electrify America. You might start to get some Tesla superchargers open now, but it's been, very rare to see multiple providers, and now I can do an entire tour of different providers down that corridor. So I will end on a positive note for the NEVI program. Certainly think we've hit some of the problems and the concerns that we have for it long term, but I, for one, am glad that it is still there, and kind of a triumph of policy making in its survival mode, if not a political triumph for the folks who put it in motion all those years ago. Jacob, thank you so much for joining us as a returning guest and covering those bases down in the Southwest. We appreciate that. As I mentioned, I think you can certainly call out any specific videos or site tours you've got, but Jacob's over on X, formerly Twitter, as Mr. RT Penguin. Tons of site tour videos, kind of holding CPOs to account down there, and doing a great job. And then over on YouTube, same kind of different angles. But yeah, let us know anything that you really want to call out, Jacob, before we.
So I
jump.
think just one last point there. So I think, yeah, what Walter mentioned, the investor, well, I'm going to expand on that, but the investor-owned utilities, so the electric utilities can do a lot of work, and the IOUs are, that's the industry parlance, they're more capable, and they're used to high power demand, so they can really push the EV market forward compared to electric co-ops who usually aren't used to such high power demands. It actually took, like I said, past weekend in the Permian Basin, I actually went to the oil museum there, and it was like very interesting to see. It's like the industry, the electric vehicle industry 100 years ago, like the very old gas pumps, and how it was starting out this new type of fuel, gasoline. So with the electricity, the grid's already all around us. I think we're going to start to see the momentum building. And like I said, this early generation, we're going to look back on the early 2020s and see this was really pioneer days for electric vehicles. We're going to start to see it really improve, and yeah, we're going to see more price competition and also so amenities and other ones. I'm still early days to see it here in New Mexico, but I think we're going to start to see it. I'll have more videos out on my channel next year. I'll hopefully take a larger trip to the Texas Triangle. Definitely go to my Ko-Fi link, kofi.com/RDPenguin1. Should also be linked there to set up for donation goals for that. But yeah, my hard drive is a little bit under recovery right now, but I think it's, like I said, my lucky day, 7 years. And 7 days ago, I overcame something big as well. So get some more videos out, the ones of the road trip through Panhandle of Oklahoma and some other ones I did this year to wrap up the year. Should be coming out next 7 days and throughout the end of the year. So I'll definitely have more content there and throughout the coming months.
Sweet. Thank you. Yeah, well, I'll get all the links down in the Ko-Fi one I did not put in, but definitely power Jacob's travel with some Ko-Fi funds there. That's something we all need as we hit the road and get out there, pay for these charging sessions, bring them to everybody. So definitely support Jacob as best you can via the links that will appear magically a couple of days after I publish this. Thank you everybody for joining. I'll make sure we call out fellow co-hosts here. Eric Way, News Coolum, Northern California, and Whole Cat Ranch. We will never see the cats, cat power, etc. Yeah, thank you for weighing in from the West Coast and giving that kind of EV mecca additions. Walter has just published a video. I'm going to go and watch that after this one, and some of that footage that you saw earlier, if it wasn't interrupted with audio, is going to be in there, I think. So you can catch him at the Network Architect channel and also covering DCFC every week for out-of-spec bits. I'm right here, so you can find us here in far too many formats by the sound of it. I will have that resolved by the next time out, and as Tom said somewhere here, if I can find it, next issue or edition of this is number 50. So aside from actually having to figure out the technical gremlins and seeing if we stay on StreamYard, everything else will be changing up a little bit. I'm going to get some new stuff in here, get some format shifts. If I can do it in the next 2 weeks, fabulous. If not, we will see you sometime on the other side of Thanksgiving with some kind of new format and definitely some new features. So thank you to everybody for joining us. Thank you, Jacob, for joining as a returning guest. And until the next time, have a great Thanksgiving, good holiday season, and cheers, nerds. Woohoo!